everyone, and welcome to the Joy and Jargon show. My name is Orlan, and today I have the great honor to speak to Susan Scott, a youth information officer. We are going to explore the office work jargon and analyze how it can become a very funny tool or put us in an awkward situation. First of all, welcome to the show, Susan. Thank you so much for accepting our invitation today. How are you?
I'm fine, thank you very much. Thank you for the offer of the invitation. It's nice to be here with you.
Great. So we'll dive in straight away. Could you tell us a bit about your job as a youth information officer, please?
Yes, I work in Dublin and I work for, it's an agency that looks after youth work and social care, and it's known as Cross Care. So my job is in a local office in Clondalkin and I'm their youth information officer. So essentially I answer questions and queries for young people, usually around the ages 15 to 25, that kind of group. And sometimes some parents or some care workers will ask questions on their behalf. So I try and help them with things that are bothering them or things that they need to do, like for example, get a job or make an application or get some help from a local organization.
And do you get lots of questions from?
Yes, there would be a steady flow of queries coming in. Not all the time people actually come in. Sometimes they will ring me or I would get an email or a WhatsApp kind of query. So there's a few different methods that I can answer people's queries. But the one that I would prefer that suits me well is when people come in because you get to meet them face to face. And you kind of get to see maybe what's going on for them. If they're asking you something for a little bit of support, you can ask them. It's nicer and easier to ask them, can you tell me what's going on for you? Or would you like to give me a little bit of background information? Sometimes on the phone, that's harder. You cut to the chase. You need to know what they want quicker because you can't see them. So I prefer face to face because it's more enjoyable and it's very nice working with people, I think, as well.
Would you say that when you are face to face, you are using a different type of vocabulary than when you are on the phone?
I think probably I'm using some of the same vocabulary, but when you're face to face, because it's like a conversation and you're looking at how people are presenting, like what their feelings are, you might, if you ask them maybe a hard question, you might see their reaction and you might just say, maybe you want to think about that for a few minutes and tell me in a few minutes, or that sounds like it was difficult, or it looks like that was a difficult point in your life. You can their feelings are more visible on their face, so you can make your questions a little bit more humane, or you see where the sensitive points are for them. So you might rephrase it, or you might repeat it a different way so that they have time to get themselves together to give you the answer. Does that make sense? It's like a dialogue rather than just like someone on the phone. What do you need? Okay, here's what we'll do, or how we'll get there. It's a conversation, more of a conversation when it's one to one, I think. I think so anyway.
It does make sense. When we are, yeah, there is the verbal language and also the body language, I suppose, when we are face to face. That influence the verbal language.
Yeah, you can see also if something is challenging somebody, and you can decide maybe I won't pursue that. I will meet them again and we can go into that in a little bit more detail.
Regarding vocabulary, would you have like very key terms or phrases that you would use that would really define your job?
I know some phrases that I would use pretty much almost on a day-to-day level. So the ones that would be most popular would be the term careers. Sometimes people will just ask about jobs. Other people will approach it in terms of employment opportunities. Usually, training and qualifications form a big part of the conversation if people are looking for new opportunities or to progress in an educational way. CVs and interview skills or interview preparation would be another couple of phrases that we would use a lot. And most definitely, supports and services, both locally, nationally, and internationally. Those would be things that people would be looking for information on. Who do I go to if I have this issue? Or if I move to Europe, what agency would I be working with there? This kind of thing. So they would be the key ones, I think, from my point of view, from
Okay.
my job. And we're very similar. The youth information people around the country, jobs and careers for young people will be, I would imagine, and education and returning to education, those would be quite topical queries that we would receive, among everything else. But they would be sort of, we could say, bread and butter queries, or phrases that go with those queries.
Do you make a distinction between employment and job? I mean, you mentioned several terms at the beginning of your
Mhm.
employment, job, career.
Yeah. Well, I think if a young person who's 16 or 17, they don't usually come into me and ask me about employment. They say, I'm looking for either a part-time job or a full-time job or a summer job. So for them, employment is a little bit abstract. And I think even in Ireland, employment services, the national ones like Intro and all them, they kind of are slightly formal in a way. And when we write on the CV employment history or whatever, it's to me it's a slightly more formal. It's almost like a requirement where the job seems to be softer and a little bit more achievable at an early level, a first job or a second job, and then a higher level job. So I think there's not quite a distinction. It's just because of the age group that I work with, I think. That's what I think makes the two words. Is to me they're interchangeable, but if I'm filling in a report, I will talk about employment services or employment supports. I won't really put down job supports, but if we're making a leaflet or designing a leaflet, we will call it "Get That Job," because we know that will be what would appeal to young people.
So it is quite important, the word that you're using, according to the public that you're talking to, does make it.
Yeah. So possibly age appropriate, or Elaine, I think maybe what we often say. So, some people might have a more formal approach. But for young people, we think jobs suits them a little better and they seem to reflect that back to us.
And would it be the same with education and training?
I think a little bit different because education can mean so many things. So sometimes on a CV for a young person who's only 17 or 18, they might only still be in secondary education or just finished. So that's what I'm referring to, their secondary experience, where they are, have they got their leaving certificate exam, their junior certificate. But then when I'm talking about education more broadly, I might be on a local committee that looks at educational supports and transitions so that young people who are struggling in primary school move successfully to secondary school, and then they get a good quality experience in secondary school, and then they hopefully progress to further education or higher education. So because there are so many rungs on the rungs of possibility, I suppose, in education. It's a broad, really broad term. But again, to me, the relationship is what the age and experience of the young person is. That the education that I'm talking about will be different for different people. If they're a graduate and they're going on to do a master's or something even more sophisticated, to me, I'm talking then about third level education. But for somebody who's maybe wanting to go back to get upskill or reskill, that might be return to education and it could be at a further education level. So it's related to the levels that are out there and the opportunities and the entry level that the young person or the client is coming in with the query. Does that make sense? It's kind of tricky, like a framework of educational options.
Yeah, education seems to be like an umbrella word because
Absolutely. Umbrella word, yeah.
but so it would include training. Training goes
It
under.
it would, but training as well can be distinct. So yeah, so some people, I think training is a form of education, or kind of it's connected in that way. But sometimes at local level, training might mean, for example, there could be a young person who has yet to get their first job and they need some support. So sometimes I will refer people to we have a local partnership and they have a local area employment service, specifically with a remit for youth employment. So in that aspect, I refer my young people to that service because they want to get some training and some certificates at a lower level, or an entry level, so they would be getting things like their safe pass for working on site or whatever, or they would be getting their HACCP training for the catering industry, or they might be getting some forklift training working at heights. So to me, that's training. It's not education to me seems to last perhaps a little longer in duration. Training can be a little bit shorter. Right? That's it's just a kind of a feeling I have about it, but they're very much educationally based. But training, I think, might be and can be sometimes of a shorter duration for a specific purpose, like a certificate over a couple of weeks. Whereas education might require you to actually enter into something and complete a year or 2 years or a 3 or 4 year degree, So it sort of has a umbrella term, but in educational terms, it can have a time implication, of giving time to complete it, where training can be a little shorter. That's just the way I think about it.
I understand that training is kind of a specialization or over a short period. So
Yeah, I think so. And it can be an umbrella term as well. If we said to somebody, oh, I think you need more training in that, that's a broad thing. It's like me saying a little bit more education would be good. But so training is both umbrella term as well, but I think it is also very specific in the options that present under training. So it's a funny one as well. It's broad, but it can be also very precise depending on what you're looking for.
I hear it like the same way job is kind of more approachable. Training seems to me the same, like something not so difficult as a full education, or it seems like it's softer in a way.
I think you're right. I think it might have. I think there can be some people who have what we would sort of sometimes call a negative educational experience, or the first time around schooling or education was hard for them or difficult. So education can be a little bit of a trigger word to upset them a bit, or maybe they think I didn't do so well in the education system the first time around. So education is not for me, that they get just a fear. So that's why sometimes I think we watch for stuff like that, and then we might start with it, something softer like a bit of training, some training to get, stepping stones, of competence and confidence, maybe, So I think you're right. We use it just sometimes to make things softer and more approachable. But equally, training can be very detailed and demanding, and apprenticeships are both on the job and in college or in the training center. So they are very high level training, So we try and see what people are getting out of the phrases, and we make it more palatable for them to think about it if they've had a negative experience. You don't want to frighten them off and reinforce what they've already had. You want to sort of say, oh, there's so much out there now, such interesting stuff, blended learning, things are different the way people learn. So there's always something for somebody in the way the training can be delivered. So it's to remind people that things might have moved on, particularly if they're a younger adult or an older adult coming back to education, that they be well able for it, and sometimes we will start rather than jumping straight in with a big degree or something, we will start with what kind of training will get you on that career path. And then very quickly they will realize that it might need a degree or something. But at that point they have had a chance to digest the information, and they understand the pathway to that career.
It's nice to see how we can use the language to soften our
Include people, I think, soften and bring them into the conversation rather than alienate them.
And now, what would you recommend or advise new employee? How would you help them to use the right vocabulary and to do their job well, especially through the kind of terms that they use? You have already answered this question by the fact that you adapt your vocabulary according to the person in front of you. But would you have any further advice?
I'm interested when you say to me, have you any advice? Because it's in my role, but in our role in general in youth information, we tend to steer clear of even using the word advice. So sometimes people will ring me and they will say, I'm looking for a bit of advice. And in a nice way, I say, well, I don't actually give advice. I give you a chance to have a chat and some information about the options. But because I'm not we don't classify ourselves as an advisory or advice type service. We actually, because that's not what we are. For me, advice sort of implies somebody with a specialization in an area, So I give you an example here. We have MABS, which is Money Advice and Budgeting Service in the country, and that's for people who are getting some support around managing their bills and among other things, financial supports on planning and budgeting. So that's their speciality, that's their remit. So that they do it kind of to a very high level. So for me, I would actually say to anyone who comes in, if they were helping me or anything, I'd say, no, just a word of advice. Don't use advice. Just mention that we do information and supports and stuff because we're not actually an advisory service. And it has implications, I think, for if you gave somebody the wrong advice, you know what I mean? They're coming to you assuming you're a specialist and have perhaps the legal framework around that. So just on a soft level, we wouldn't use it. So what I would say to you is we stress that we're an information provider. And then, as well as that, then we signpost and direct people to other professional services if we think that's what they need. So someone can come into me and ask me for advice on something or other, but I will say your specialist service there is the money advice and budgeting or free legal advice service, So I will tell them where our mediation services. So I know where they need to go for that specialist stuff. And the conversation I have then is about setting them up for the right next step. So that's the difference for me, or the very clear distinction between youth information, our information services, and advice. And then the other thing that's quite important is I would never personally advise someone to take a particular route or action. That's not my job to say to them, you should go to this college because it's closest to you or because your parent wants you to go there. My conversation is to ask people what they want themselves and to look at things practically like, oh, you want to go to that college and tell me something. How would you get there? What kind of transport is available? Do you think you'll make it on time for the lecture? So by having a conversation, they very quickly come around to the idea, actually, no, that's probably too far from where I live or from our bus service. It gives them a chance to tease out the options and then they can decide then to act on whatever options were given. Or sometimes people come in, they get the options, and we have a chat about the pros and cons. And then that's their choice. I may never see them again. I might see them again in a week's time, or they can take that information or not take that information. I have no agenda to push them into a college or to push them into a job. I just give them the options. And we kind of say we have an informed conversation. So it's a chance for them to say, oh, look, my mom or dad wants me to do this, but it's not my favorite thing. Or if they're nervous of going to college, then they can tell me that. And we can say, well, they have, adult education supports, career services, the same as you have access to me, you have access to the same people in college. So it's a conversation really about options and choices, but the person or the young person, that's up to them to make or not make that choice or not take it. That's perfectly fine with me. My job is done when I've given them an array of information or some options that are to give them a chance to believe that change is possible. And that's sort of my job, is that to just set the tone and to support and encourage. But what they do or don't do with the info is completely their choice. So it's very personal, person centered, but it's also the young people have the autonomy. I don't work for like some agency that's promoting something. We're just there to help.
Thank you very much for making this distinction, because personally, if I see information, I would link it immediately with advice. So it's very good to hear that there is a very clear distinction between advice services and information services. Thank you very much, Susan, for this answer. Now, to finish on a light note, could you tell us an anecdote where you use a term, one of your key terms or phrases, and that leaded to a funny situation or awkward situation?
It's a tricky one to explain, but it's a sort of a play on words. So one of the queries that I spend a lot of time on, or one of the pieces of information that I promote a lot during the year, relates to a financial support program. It's a government supported program for going to college. So it's financial support for students. And it's a name, or it's an acronym, I suppose, is SUSI. So that's SUSI, okay? And it actually stands for Student Universal Support Ireland. So that's a funding kind of mechanism. So as I said, it offers students a chance to apply for grants for college to support them while they're there. So when the name was or when the name was sort of rebranded or it was relaunched, they came up with this SUSI, Susie as we call it, name. So locally, people ring me and they talk to me and they say to me, if anyone was coming, they might ring me up and they would say, I want to talk to you about Susie, the maintenance grant. So that's fine. I know what they're talking about. But in the early days, phone calls used to come to the office and my colleagues would be laughing because the person would say on the phone, I want to speak to Susie. And obviously, my name being Susan and Susie being a possible short name among friends, it was funny. They were getting a good laugh of, here somebody wants to speak to Susie. And of course, in work, I wouldn't be known as Susie, even with friends, not so much, maybe family members. So it's just they got a good laugh out of it. And so sometimes now when I go to a college or a school to just present how to apply, I will just explain to the students it's just a bizarre coincidence that Susie is the name of the scheme, and then I could be mistaken for Susie. So I take, there's no problem. If somebody said it, I'd know exactly what they were looking for. But I just know my colleagues got a great laugh out of it for the first couple of months when everyone was looking for Susie.
It's a funny coincidence.
Yeah. But it's good as well because at least maybe it sticks in their mind when they're, looking for the information. They remember. So I'll often bring it up straight away when I'm in the school. I say, by the way, yeah, I'm not actually Susie. Susie is the scheme, but my name is Susan and there's no problem. Just, call me Susan. That kind of thing.
Thank you so much, Susan, aka Susie,
Susie.
for yeah, sharing all of this information with us. And it's very insightful and very interesting. I personally learned a lot. And before I finish, would you have anything else you would like to add?
No, that's okay. I think that's everything. Sorry, apologies. I do. I should say that our service is free, confidential, and non-directive. That's the little phrase we use. So anyone is welcome to contact me in relation to my work. They're welcome, and if they're looking for something, I hopefully can redirect them, either answer them, what they need, or redirect them to a service that's closer to them, maybe geographically or whatever. But that's our role. So later you can probably put up the links to the work kind of service. As I say, it's open to the public, and we're always trying to promote that we're there for them, and we'll be delighted to help.
Thank you. Yeah, I will definitely put all the detail um, in the comment section of this show. Also, I know that you also teach English. Is that
Yes, I have done the teaching English course as well, so it would be separate kind of to my day-to-day job. But again, if anyone is interested to hear more about that, they can also have a look at the links section. So I'm interested in words. You could say as well, I do like I do think a lot about how you would teach people and actually try and explain. We do a lot of explaining in the day job. So I think sometimes teaching a language as well, the job maybe equips you for finding different words for the same thing and making it a different way, rephrasing it and maybe making it more approachable. So there is a little overlap, I think, between just information work and youth information in particular. And I do like the semantics of the language as well.
yeah, and that's also one reason why I invited you because I knew your interest in languages, and as it's a big part of our show, I thought you would be the perfect candidate. Thank you again very much for coming today and for sharing your knowledge with us. It was a pleasure to have you, and I hope maybe we'll see you again in the future.
Well, thank you very much for the invitation. Very enjoyable.
Thank you. That's it for today. You have just listened to the Joy and Jargon show. My name is Arlan, and I wish you a wonderful day. Bye.